The goal that we've had as a city is we love Newport on the Levee. They do a fantastic job, but we want people when they visit town to come off Newport on the Levee and walk down the street and see what we have to offer. And I think that those clubs were a barrier for a lot of folks that didn't want to walk that far down.
Joined now by the city manager of Newport, Kentucky, John Hayden. John, thank you very much for coming on the show. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on.
You guys have a lot going on. You know, we sort of set the table in the Big Bite segment about various developments that Newport has going on, but the whole reason that I reached out to you in the first place was when the announcement that the Brass Ass and the Brass Bull and Huddles were closing down, and then it wasn't long after that that the city of Newport announced, hey, we're going to be buying that piece of property. Tell me about what that process was like for you. It feels like it happened very quickly.
It seems that way to the outside, but there was a lot of months, a lot of time that was put into this. And you know, your point is exactly right. It's a generational change, and it goes way back in time. But if you look at the late 50s, where George Ratterin was started campaigning for sheriff, and when that happened, it started all the dominoes in place, and it took decades to get there. So by closing these last two places down is a big deal. Ultimately, how we got there was the lady that owned all the clubs, she passed away about a year or so ago, and we started hearing through the grapevine that they had some interest in selling. But the properties were never listed anywhere. You know, there's no signs out. So we were approached by an individual who wanted to help us out, kind of act as a broker of sorts, and said, I think I can get a deal done with them. And he said, I don't really want the property and I don't want to develop it. He said, but I would prefer that these places be gone and this reputation of Newport go away. So he asked us if we would be interested. And of course we were.
Yeah, and so you guys, the city of Newport, lined up, what, about $4 million to buy it? But you guys aren't looking to actually then develop it yourselves, right?
That's correct. We don't want to be landlords. We don't want to be in the development business. This is not something that we would typically do as a city, but we felt like the consequences were really important of what would happen if we didn't buy it. This gives us the opportunity to do an RFP, which we'll probably do in the next 30 to 45 days, and solicit offers and see what projects are out there. We've already been hearing from several people that have ideas, so I think that we're going to get a lot of things to sift through and figure out. And I think that when that final product's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, was it? I mean, it was clearly important for you guys to not leave it up to chance if those properties were just going to be put on the market. Was that something that came from Mayor Gaduli, or was that something that just everybody agreed on?
I think the entire board agreed with that, because there's very few places that adult entertainment can be in the city anymore. On Monmouth Street, while technically it's allowed, there's other restrictions based on proximity to churches, schools, other things. So really, there's no place for them to go on Monmouth Street anymore. But those two locations have been grandfathered in, so we couldn't get rid of them. So if they had sold and they would have went to another operator, it could get worse. Or they could just sit vacant for a long time. And the goal that we've had as a city is we love Newport on the Levee. They do a fantastic job, but we want people when they visit town to come off Newport on the Levee and walk down the street and see what we have to offer. And I think that those clubs were a barrier for a lot of folks that didn't want to walk that far down.
Yeah, I'm curious about the city's opinion of that area. The further north from there, where the levee is and where that new development's going in, that's maybe some newer and shinier stuff. But I mean, those are sort of historic buildings there along Monmouth, and Monmouth is kind of the main drag. So this was a priority for you guys. Is this maybe the start of some larger plans for that stretch of road?
I think that it will be a game changer. There is on the block down, there's a restaurant called the Pepper Pod, which owns a lot of property up until I'd say 2 or 3 buildings there, and they've been for sale, but they're a block away from where the Brass was, and I think that probably has helped slow down the sale of the Pepper Pod location. So you think that could be a really good development. Then you go down to where we're at on the 600 block of Monmouth Street, and I think the sky's the limit, because if you look at the numbers for investment and permits that have been pulled for renovations, a lot of it 400 block. And then when you get to the 600 block, very, very little. 700 block, a little bit more, and then it starts getting more invested as you get past that. So I think that there was a barrier because of it. And we were told by one developer who had purchased a building down there that he had had a tenant who was very excited about Newport, very excited about his building, and said, look, I just want to walk around the neighborhood a little bit, get a feel for things before we make a decision. He said they came back 30 minutes later and said, we don't want to be located next to these places.
Wow.
So we don't know an opportunity cost what all we've lost over time because of the reputation and because of kind of the general seediness of the area there.
Well, and I know that when the announcement was made that the city was buying that property, I might have been a quote from you talking about the number of police runs to that area on a regular basis for various, assaults and gunshots and everything else. It's certainly an area that gets a lot of attention that you're not looking for.
Well, that's exactly right. And our police had been almost religiously camped out in front of those places on the weekends from about 1 to about 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's a drain on our resources there on top of all the other calls. We had a homicide at one of those bars a few years ago. And those types of things, when they get in the paper or people walk down the street and they see police cars, if they're not from around here, they say, I think I'm not going to go down that far. And I understand that.
So this being sort of generational change, which I think might have been me quoting you on that, is this also going to be with some intention of making Newport feel a little bit more connected to the levee itself? The levee is such a destination-y kind of place, and I think a lot of people go there and they think, well, I've been to Newport now, that's all there is.
Sure. And it's been a challenge. I was started my career in Newport as a city commissioner in 2009. And, from then, even before that, I know one of the challenges that Newport leaders have had are, how do we get people to step off the levee? How do we get them to walk down Mama Street? We got some great stuff. Dixie Chili is a classic establishment. Strong's Pizza, Newport Pizza.
Newport Pizza is extremely, extremely good.
Absolutely. And these are some gems that I think a lot of people out of town don't know about if they don't walk down the street. So I think that ultimately, whatever the project is that we choose will be something that will add some vibrancy to the area. We're seeing that right now. You mentioned urban sites. On the old Peace Belt site. And, you're looking at 6 or 7 stories of apartments with retail downstairs. And one of the things that we had a conversation with them about is they said, we could put a coffee shop down there. And I said, please don't put something that's going to be there. It's going to be open later in the evening so that there's some vibrancy on the street. And, I travel out of town and I go to places that I haven't been. If I walk down the street and I don't see anybody and the lights are out and you don't see anything as far as your eye can see, you're not going to walk down any further. And there has to be things that draw people down there, and it has to be vibrant, it has to feel safe, and those are some of the big priorities we have.
How is that for you, being the city manager and, carrying out the actions of city leadership between the mayor and what the commissioners are looking to have executed, but then you're also on the ground talking with various business owners and developers? Are you sort of the middleman in between? Does it feel like you're caught between two different things? I mean, where your bread's buttered, but you've got to voice concerns too.
Sure. So myself and my assistant Brian Steffen spend a lot of time talking to our board members, getting their input, understanding the pulse of where they're at. And we spend a lot of time relaying back information that we've learned from developers, residents, other interested parties. So you try to take what the vision of the group collectively is, and sometimes they may vary quite a bit from commissioner to commissioner. But you try to take the essence of what it is that they want to see accomplished and try your best to make that happen. Yeah.
Talking about other developments that Newport has going on, those Christopher apartments that PLK is looking to put in at the old Newport Steel site. This is a really big project just from the remediation standpoint of it.
That's absolutely right. That's a site that's been vacant for probably about 30 plus years since the steel mill left. There was significant environmental concerns, and that's what kept most people away.
Right.
And I think they spent about $5 million just in soil remediation alone. So, we had incentivized that deal, and it was well worth it because Route 9, when it got connected to Newport probably about 10 or 12 years ago, all the way through there, we've been waiting for some nice development to spark that area as well. Because you've got New Rift Distilling down there, which is a fantastic place. But other than that, there's not much down there. So this is a great opportunity to bring some vibrancy there as well, and then hopefully that will spur development all the way down Route 9.
Yeah, I mean that's there's a look at what it's going to look like in theory when the sun hits it just right. There's a lot going on along that stretch of road there. What is I'm always very happy to see when housing developments are going in, even if those are some nicer townhomes maybe, but I know there's also a lot of market rate apartment discussions going on with that urban sites location. As far as the housing situation in Newport goes, you're connected on both the government and being in touch with developers and business owners. How is the housing situation there in Newport?
Like everywhere, it's tough. Housing market is very strong right now, which is a good thing that we like seeing that people want to live in the city, and there's a lot of demand for houses. Affordability is always a concern because we don't want to be just a community of the rich. Newport has always been a very diverse community, and we want to keep it that way. Our Newport Housing Authority, led by Tom Gaduli Sr., the mayor's dad, has done a fantastic job in a lot of affordable options for folks. I think they probably got about 200 units that they've created over the last decade or so. And a lot of entry-level homes, forgivable second mortgages. And as soon as those properties go on the market, they get snapped up almost immediately.
Yeah, a lot of interest in Newport, in large part driven by developments like the Levee and that Aqua apartment complex, which is a really nice facility in there. What has it been like for you guys as far as the Brent Spence corridor construction stuff? I feel like Covington has taken it a little more in the chin on that as far as traffic disruptions to people being able to get in town. But you guys had your own issues with the Big Mac Bridge, with the 471 closure a few months back.
Absolutely. I think the 4th Street Bridge being closed, Brent Spence, I think those things do have an effect on the city. We haven't gotten the concerns from residents or business owners the same as they have in Covington, so I think it's been worse for them than it has been for us. There's still a lot of easy ways to get into Newport. If you're in Covington, you take Roebling over and come back to town or Southgate, things like that. So we haven't had that as a complaint. I had lunch with the GM of the Newport and the Levee last week, and they said business is doing very good, didn't express any adverse effects, so that's positive.
Yeah, are there do you know anything about Jamestown's plans for the levee as opposed to the North American properties that had that big announcement about we're really going to retool the place?
I think they're looking at different options. The levee has transitioned somewhat over the years. So, we're used to go in and upstairs they had Dewey's Pizza and things like that. Now they've turned a lot of them into office space. Mm-hmm. So, which for the city is a win because, our budget is primarily based on payroll tax. So office is always a great thing for us to see. I think it also builds for them built-in patrons. So people go to lunch or have a drink after work. So I think it really makes a good relationship for the business and the levee folks themselves.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot going on, certainly. We didn't even get into the parks plans that you've got, but we do need to take a break. We'll be back with more. John Hayden is the city manager of Newport, Kentucky, going over all the different projects in that riverfront city here, big part of the tri-state, and lots of big plans coming. We're going to take a break. More to come on The Working Lunch. You're watching The Crown. Welcome back to The Working Lunch. I'm Jack Crumley, joined by Newport, Kentucky City Manager John Hayden. John, letting us know about Newport's various development plans, whether it's property the city is buying itself and looking for somebody else to work on, or different developments that outfits like Urban Sites are looking to do, PLK, all sorts of developments, mixed use, business, retail, the whole 9 yards. But you as city manager, I think you're in a unique position, and I like talking with city managers because you don't really have to worry about the politics of things. It's your job to execute and make stuff happen. You're working with elected leaders. You're working with business owners. I think you're in a really unique position, and you are the first new city manager that Newport had in like 20 years, right?
That's right.
How is that like for you coming into that role?
I spent 2 years working under Tom Fromey, who had been city manager since about 2005. So I was familiar. He had me sit in on almost everything that he did for a couple of years. So I got a firsthand view of it, kind of understood it. But when you take the job and on day one, when it's just you and there's nobody to hide behind, then it becomes really real. And I learned there was a whole lot of stuff that I didn't know. So I started picking up on things very quickly. You think you have a good grasp on it until you get in there and like, oh, okay, there's more to learn. And
that's really how it is. I only knew what I knew, and I didn't know what I didn't know. Sounds like trying to host a show sometimes. You came into the city management position, though. You had been previously working on the elected office version of things.
Yes. So when I started out, I was elected in 2008, started in 2009. I did that for 8 years, which was interesting. And I think that being able to understand what the board members go through helps a lot for me, one, being empathetic with the situation,
Right.
because, there can be a lot of pressure from residents, people that want certain things done, a lot of hard questions that people have sometimes. And the other piece of it is knowing, when I was a city commissioner, things that I wanted to see from the city or the city manager's office specifically, and information that I wanted to know and things like that. So it helped me kind of tailor the job based on my prior experience.
What got you interested in, civil work? You've always been a Newport guy, right?
Absolutely. Grew up in Newport, went to law school. And when I was younger, my goal was to get into elected office at some point, or to be involved in it. When I was in college, I interned in the United States Senate, and I was like, this is the coolest thing. And being around DC and the policymakers and seeing all this stuff, and I was like, I really want to do this. The problem was, you got to be really connected to get those jobs in DC. So I learned that very quickly, was that I wasn't rich and I wasn't connected. So, got some interviews, never got, past first base on any of that, and started kind of reevaluating. At some point I said, if I'm going to do this stuff, then I'm going to have to make my own destiny with it. So I ended up running. I had never pictured myself, in college, running for city commission or doing any of that. But I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of hard work, but a lot of fun.
Was it interesting making that pivot from being on the city commission to working in the city manager's office, not having to worry about any sort of, elected type stuff, and going into like a nuts and bolts, get it done kind of vibe? Yeah,
I liked it a lot better. You're not worried about raising money. You're not worried about putting yard signs out. And city commissioners run every 2 years. So you're almost always in election mode. So not having to have that kind of distraction and really focus on the work and getting things done is really satisfying. And, I try to be the best advocate for my city commissioners. I want to make them look good, but you also stay out of the political fray. So, right now is an election year, and I welcome conversation with the other candidates as well, because, I emailed all the candidates that were running this year that were on the outside and said, I was in your spot. And when first time I ran for city commission, I had lost in 2004, and I had nobody from the city reach out to me. Nobody wanted to communicate with me. And I feel like these candidates running deserve to have information. They deserve to know what's going on, so that they may ultimately get on the board. You just never know. And I try to have relationships with everybody. It's the important part of the job, is staying nonpartisan, staying out of that fray.
That first go of running and losing wasn't enough to dissuade you from trying again, though?
No, I learned some lessons. There was a state rep named Dennis Keene. He was running for his first term the year I was running the first time. And when I saw him everywhere, we were at all these events. And so after the election was over, he called me and said, he says, I think you got potential to win. He says, but you just need a little bit of polish in here, a couple of things. He said, let me help teach you a little bit. And when the time's right, you try it again, and that time you won't lose. And he was right. I set out one election and ran again in 2008, and ended up unseating, at that time, the longest serving commissioner in Newport. He had been over 20 some years in office. So it took a lot of hard work. I think I won by like 60 votes or something.
Wow, right on. Okay, so then now that sort of springboards you into local city leadership. Now that you're in the city manager's position, and you sort of have cast off the shackles of caring about votes and campaigning and that sort of thing, does that help to come up with a vision for what the city is going to be development-wise, working maybe with the mayor on long-term plans versus dealing with one thing to the next?
That's right. We spend a lot of time having conversations with those guys and kind of developing, what do we want to see? What do we want Newport to be? And it's changed so much in the city, and we talk about, 1960 and all of this stuff, but you think about how much it's changed, in the 90s. I grew up in Newport, and I remember walking down Monmouth Street in the late 80s, and you don't realize then what it is, but looking back and think, man, you'd see every block had these strip clubs, and they'd have pictures of the girls out front, and it was crazy. So I think that I kind of saw what I thought Newport should be, and I think a lot of our board members share a very similar vision. We may differ on the details, but the overall, that we want this city to be safe. We want people to be able to be walkable. We want to offer good jobs. We want to have nice housing. I think we all agree on those things. And then we just work together on the method how to make that happen.
What's it like for you being a local guy who's now, in one of the driver's seats and having a say and having a hand on the wheel? I'm just going to keep going with car metaphors for a minute in guiding this turnaround.
It's incredible, because there's something different, I think, when you're from the city that you represent, because you take pride in it. I went to school at Newport. I had so many friends there and know a lot of folks and frequent in these businesses. So I think it's more personal when you've been from the city, and it's very satisfying when you can see some of these big changes being made. Like we haven't talked about Purple People Bridge, but
right.
When I took over as city manager, there was a different entity that was running the bridge, and we had co-ownership with them through an LLC, and the bridge was in disrepair. It wasn't raising the funds, and I was like, we've got to do something about this. And to be able to, we took ownership of the bridge completely. A lot of people said, you're never going to get any money for that thing. We went down to Frankfurt. We lobbied very hard. We got $2 million from them. We've been building relationships with our friends in Cincinnati. And for a long time, I think Newport was kind of parochial. We didn't build bridges, so to speak. So I think having a good relationship with Cincinnati, and there's several councilmen now that we've had some relationships with, I think it's going to be very positive for the future of the city. And it's satisfying being able to do that,
Well, it makes sense. I mean, why wouldn't you want to be able to work with, people that are nearby and other municipalities? Everybody's influencing each other anyway.
Absolutely. And, a lot of the reason that we're successful is because Cincinnati is successful. People come to watch the Reds or watch the Bengals, and they stay over here, or they come here to eat or drink. So we want them to be successful. We should be partners with them. We don't have the resources that a city like Cincinnati has, but we do have a lot of stuff to offer. And I think a lot of people prefer a little calmer, a little different environment in Newport than it is if you're downtown or on the banks or something. So I think we have a nice alternative as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have options, if nothing else. Having everybody funnel into just one place and having that be the only choice, that's less desirable than having options.
That's right.
And getting back to the city's purchase of the Brass Ass and the Brass Bowl and Huddles area there, what are we thinking about? What is it that you would like to see go in there?
I think the first thing, and everybody asks about the first question, is what are you going to do with the neons? So I think the number one thing that we're going to do at the short term is have an expert come in and look at the neons and figure out a way to get those things lit back up so it looks really cool.
Okay.
I think it's a priority for us for at least the facade of that building to remain. We've walked through it. It's an interesting spot. There could be certainly a lot of interesting options could go in there, but you could also build up from it. We've talked about the idea of, you could have a nice boutique hotel, or you could have a nice apartment complex. You could build a couple floors up. So that would be cool. The other side, between the parking lot, Brass Bowl, and Huddles, that's about a half an acre. So for context, that's approximately the same size as the urban sites footprint. So
yeah, okay.
You could theoretically build, an apartment tower there as well. And I don't know that that's what will ultimately happen, obviously. I think there's a lot of creative minds out there that have thoughts about this. And some of the things that I've heard from different folks already is like, I think the community will be impressed by the amount of offers that we get. And we'll have some public input sessions at some point, because we know that residents and business owners want to kind of say, this is what I'd like to see down here. So we want to balance those concerns too and make sure the community feels like they're heard in all of this.
Yeah, so I mean, the plan is right now the city owns it. You guys are ultimately looking to sell it to somebody. And if that decision is going to be based on the input you get from the community, and then also what the pitch is from a given developer saying what it is they want to do.
Absolutely right.
I assume there's no timeline on this exactly.
There's not. We want to get started as soon as we can, though. We'll put the RFP out probably about 30, 45 days and move as quick as we can.
Sounds like a really big opportunity for having a say in transforming what Newport looks like and what Newport is known for versus maybe what it is remembered for.
I think that's exactly right.
John Hayden is the city manager for Newport, Kentucky. John, thank you very much for coming on the show and giving us some insight into everything that's going on and a lot of plans going forward. You guys have a lot on your plate.
Absolutely. I appreciate the invite. Happy to come back anytime and fill you in.
Glad to have you.